Okay, this video is to explain the cooling system and also the bilge system on a Kawasaki 650 or 750 sit down. This happens to be a 750 sit down pipe and water box. So the heart of your cooling system is this fitting is where it starts. So you want to check, this one doesn't have an impeller in it, but if your impeller is all mangled or there's a big gap between your impeller and the inside of the pump, the wear ring, you're not going to get as much power. You're also not going to get as much cooling flow. So this little brass 90, I like to take it out, unthread it, put it in a vise and get a 17/64 drill bit, drill out both sides of it, and then reinstall it with some pipe dope or whatever. So, and I like to put a little mark on there where it's pointed so it's easier to line up with your hoses. But this right here, as the water is getting pushed through, then it has this cone. That's kind of what's giving it pressure. So that pressure is going to come up. There's a hose that goes up into the hull. That hose, once it's inside the engine bay, feeds into the bottom of your exhaust manifold. So I like the same thing. I like to take and drill this out 17/64. So if you're having a cooling issue, first thing you want to do is get under there, undo the hose clamp, pull this hose off, use some compressed air, have somebody look in the back of the pump and force some air through there. Make sure that it's not clogged up. Sometimes air will get through it, and you might take like a water balloon fitting, put it on your hose, and also make sure that that the water comes out of the hose comes out of your pump. So after it gets to that fitting, it's going to come up into the exhaust manifold. Now sometimes people have these set up for dual cooling. They add one more brass fitting on the pump, and then you tap your exhaust manifold for two. That's a little bit more advanced, but the basic setting, there's that brass 90 goes into the exhaust manifold, comes up into the engine, and then it's going to come out this fitting. This is normally capped off. This fitting here is where it's leaving the engine. As it's leaving the engine, some of it is going to go into a hose and go into the pipe for cooling. Now on the side of this pipe is what they call a pisser. It should go to a fitting on the side of the hull. That lets you know water's flowing through the system. Sometimes water isn't coming out, so you can take this hose off and put a piece of wire or drill bit, make sure it's not clogged up with sand or mineral deposits. There's also a little sensor with probably 2 wires on some of the sit downs in between this hose and where it exits the side of the hull, and so sometimes that can be clogged up. So you want to check that, make sure you got flow starting from the hull. You can take that hose off, make sure you got flow going through there. You could run the ski with this hose off and see what your water flow is. That's kind of to let you know that water's flowing through the system. Now on these ones, like if you're working on them, taking them apart, you know, redoing a motor or something, it's a good idea. Or if you're having a problem with your cooling, take this hose off, make sure that you can blow into this fitting, and so that water is getting into the pipe. There's a fitting on both sides. Now this fitting right here on a 750 sit down goes to the top of the water box, to the brass fitting there. Some people cap this off and run this off the side. They're trying to have less water going into the water box, less restriction, trying to get more performance. So you want to make sure that you're not getting it too hot and your rubber couplers aren't melting. On the 650 and 750 sit downs, they have this rubber hose, goes into the hole, and that's where it leaves. So if you're having problems with your cooling, make sure that fitting on the pump isn't clogged. Make sure it's getting to the exhaust manifold. Make sure it's coming out the head pipe here, and you should be able to take water while it's running, while it's warmed up, drip the water on the pipe, and it shouldn't just instantly sizzle and boil off. You should be able to, this is a water cooled pipe and engine, so you should be able to touch different parts of the engine without really getting burned. You can also get different style of hoses. If yours has this brass fitting, you can get a hose and run your ski on the trailer. You want to make sure, you always want to make sure the engine is running first, and then you turn on the water. I like to have a shutoff valve right at the hose. If the engine stalls or engine dies for whatever reason, you shut off the water and you're not backflowing your engine with water from the hose. And you don't need to crank your hose up full blast. So that's pretty much the cooling system. Now this is up underneath the bottom of the ski, so if you need to get in there and work, you might need to drop your ride plate. They're either 10 millimeter bolts usually, or sometimes they have Allen head bolts. This is your intake grate. This is what protects rocks and stuff from getting up into your pump. For me, I like to shut the engine off if I'm in, you know, waist deep water. You're in shallow water, you're sucking up sand and rocks, you're tearing up your impeller, you're sending sand. It doesn't take a whole lot of debris to clog this 90-degree fitting. So, and you're scraping up your hull too. You come flying up on the beach, you're sucking up sand and rocks, you're scraping up your hull. I like to get an anchor and a buoy, and I leave my ski floating in the water so I'm not tearing it up. So there's also on almost, and this basic setup is true for most jet skis. On the cone, there's a brass fitting here, and that's your bilge system. So the same thing, there's a hose that goes to the hull, the outside of the hull, goes through the hull, and then it's gonna come through the hose, through the hole. There's an aluminum pipe, and it goes into here. Now this is up high. There's a tiny little pinhole in this plastic fitting, and it bolts to the hull. You probably barely see it there, but that's so that you don't siphon water back into the hull when it's sitting in the water. So, you know, it might be a good idea to clean this out. This is gonna sit, this bilge pickup is what, as you're running, the water's going through, the water passes by here, it creates a suction on this straight fitting. That's inside your nozzle. So if you're looking up at the back of your ski, same thing, it can get clogged up. Mud daubers and whatever critters can get in there. So it's the same thing. If you're having water inside your hull, pull this hose off, see if you can blow compressed air, and have somebody look at that cone and see if it's coming out that straight fitting. And then also check and see, run some air or some water into this. It's a good idea to pull these out. It's just two Phillips head screws, and it's pretty much on any ski, the water when you're going is going to go to the lowest point at the back of the hull. So this is what picks up the water, gets out any water that might be in the hull of your ski. So that's the bilge system. Anytime I'm working on a ski that has this kind of pipe, I try to leave these 4 10mm bolts alone. You can pull this whole thing out of your ski, just 2 hose clamps and the four bolts that go into your exhaust manifold, because it's a pain. If you open this up, there's gaskets in there. Sometimes you have to. If yours has corrosion, you're probably gonna have to open that up, clean it out, see if it's worth fixing, or get some different parts for it. But I pretty much do not touch these 4 bolts, 10mm bolts, on if it has this style of pipe. So that's pretty much. Now there's different style of hoses you can hook up. There's some, you know, if yours doesn't have this fitting on the cylinder head, then you can get a hose that has a T in it, and you can either T into this rubber hose here, or on pretty much any ski, you find the hose that goes from your pump, goes into the hole, comes out of the hole. You tap into that hose, you T into that hose that goes into your exhaust manifold. You can hook up the hose there. Now you want to make sure this is capped off good when you're done, because if you don't, you just leave this open, your cooling water is going to leak out and it's going to fill up your ski. So make sure this is capped off good for when you're riding. And so that's some things that you can possibly check for the cooling system. It's not hard to reach down in there, take out these Phillips head screws. These hoses don't even have clamps, so you can pull it off, pull this out, clean it up, get all these holes cleaned up so you're giving it its best chance. Make sure that fitting inside the cone isn't clogged up, and that's going to help you pull the water out when you do have some leaks.